Why your avoidant tests you before returning. We've all been there. That moment when the ex who vanished like a magician suddenly peeks back into your life. But before they walk through the door, they test you. Why? Because even avoidant people need safety. They just define it differently. You see, when someone is avoidant, emotional intimacy can feel overwhelming, even dangerous. But when they're thinking about returning, they're asking themselves, is it safe? Has this person changed? Will I still feel trapped, or will I feel free? They test you because, frankly, they're afraid. And here's the kicker. The tests aren't loud or obvious. They're subtle. A random text, a weird question, a story they tell you just to see how you'll react. They're poking the surface to see what version of you they're dealing with. Because your ex isn't just thinking, do I want them back? They're thinking, will going back feel better than it did before? If you react with anger, desperation, or too much neediness, that's their answer, and it's a no. If you respond with calm, confidence, and a little mystery of your own, suddenly you're magnetic again. The mistake most people make is over-investing in the test itself. They panic, they explain, they chase, and that just reaffirms everything the avoidant was scared of in the first place. Instead, understand, the test isn't a final exam, it's a preview. And you don't pass by performing, you pass by being the secure, self-respecting person they always secretly wished you were. The truth? You're not auditioning for them anymore, they're auditioning for you. When an avoidant ex tests you before coming back, it's not because they're trying to manipulate you or play games in the way you might assume. It's because for them, emotional intimacy feels risky. Getting close to someone has historically meant losing their freedom, feeling trapped, or being overwhelmed by expectations they're not sure they can meet. So when they think about coming back into your life, they aren't doing it casually. They're approaching with hesitation, scanning the situation for any signs that the old dynamics, the ones that made them run, are still there. At the heart of it, avoidant people have a deep-rooted fear of vulnerability. When they left, it probably wasn't because they didn't care about you. It was because the closeness either triggered anxiety or made them feel like their identity was under threat. They're thinking about returning. It means on some level they miss you, but missing you isn't enough. They need to know that if they step back into the relationship, they won't be immediately thrown back into the emotional patterns that overwhelmed them before. That's why they test you. They need to measure how safe it feels, but not in the way a securely attached person would. A securely attached person might just ask you how you feel or express their concerns openly. An avoidant will be more indirect. They might send a casual message about something that happened months ago just to see how you respond. They might drop a cryptic comment about relationships, hoping to sense whether you're still harboring resentment or whether you've moved on emotionally. To them, these little tests are necessary. They don't trust easily, not because you necessarily did something wrong, but because emotional dependency feels like danger to them. Every interaction becomes a silent calculation. Will talking to you bring peace or pressure? Will being close to you feel like freedom or suffocation? They're not looking for perfection. They're looking for something that feels lighter, safer, less consuming than before. If your energy seems calmer, if you seem like someone who has healed and isn't desperate to glue them back into your life, that's attractive to them. It suggests that being close to you might not be a threat this time. So when they reach out in these small, often confusing ways, it's not an accident. It's their way of asking without asking. Can I trust you not to trap me? Can I trust myself to stay without feeling like I need to run again? Understanding this helps you not take their test personally, and more importantly, not fall into the old traps that made them horrible pull away in the first place. When your avoidant ex tests you before coming back, it usually doesn't look dramatic or obvious. It's rarely a big, sweeping gesture where they declare they're unsure, need you to prove something. Instead, it's subtle, almost easy to miss if you aren't paying close attention. The nature of avoidant attachment is that it protects itself through distance and control, not through direct confrontation. So when an avoidant person wants to gauge how you might react to them again, they do it quietly. They test the waters in small, seemingly harmless ways that offer them a low-risk opportunity to observe your behavior without exposing themselves too much emotionally. It might be a random text that feels a little out of nowhere, maybe something funny, nostalgic, or about an inside joke you once shared. They aren't necessarily trying to dive back into deep conversation right away. They just want to see how you respond. Will you seem angry? Will you act cold? Will you immediately pour out all your feelings? Your reaction to that small message tells them volumes. In their mind, it's a way of feeling you out without stepping fully into the emotional vulnerability that terrifies them. Sometimes the tests come in the form of ambiguous comments, like mentioning how hard relationships can be or how complicated emotions are, to see if you rush to fix things, chase them, or pressure them for clarity. They might even bring up a moment from the past that was difficult, just to see if the two of you can talk about it without the old intensity coming back. Every small move they make is like dipping a toe into the water to check the temperature before deciding if it's safe to swim. What's tricky is that because these tests are so subtle, it's easy to miss the opportunity to show a new version of yourself. If you respond with too much eagerness or emotional intensity, it can feel overwhelming to them all over again. If you respond with bitterness or coldness, they'll read it as confirmation that you're still hurt and not a safe place for them emotionally. The goal, whether you're conscious of it or not, is to answer their quiet questions without losing your own balance. By being warm but not needy, responsive but not overinvested, you send the message that you're strong enough to love without clinging and secure enough to engage without losing yourself. These small, almost invisible moments matter more than people realize. In the avoidant mind, every micro interaction is a clue about whether reconnecting will be safe or just another emotional battlefield. When your avoidant ex reaches out to test you, what matters far more than the test itself is how you react to it. They're not just watching what you say, they're feeling out your emotional energy. They want to know whether engaging with you again would pull them into the kind of intensity that overwhelmed them before, or whether it would feel lighter, safer, and more balanced. Calm, confidence, and a sense of emotional self-sufficiency are the signals they're unconsciously looking for. They aren't consciously thinking, I need to see calmness, but they instinctively gravitate toward environments that don't trigger their old fears of being smothered or controlled. When you react with calmness, you're telling them without words, I'm not here to make you responsible for my happiness. I'm good either way. That kind of energy is incredibly attractive, not just to avoidant people, but to anyone. Confidence doesn't mean you have to act cold or indifferent. In fact, indifference can sometimes read as hostility. It's about being open, warm even, but not overreaching. It's about showing that while you're willing to connect, you're not handing over your self-worth to them on a silver platter. On the other hand, if you respond to their test with anger, neediness, or an attempt to immediately rush into deep emotional territory, you risk confirming their worst fears. You make it easy for them to tell themselves that nothing has changed, that getting close to you will feel just as overwhelming as it did before. Even over-explaining yourself or trying too hard to prove you're safe can backfire. From their point of view, too much emotional pressure early on is a flashing red warning light. The truth is, in these moments, you're communicating more through your vibe than through your words. When your avoidant ex sends that vague message or brings up an old memory, they're not necessarily testing your intelligence or your conversational skills. They're picking up on the subtle undercurrents. Are you still resentful? Are you still patient for them to come fix your pain? Or have you grown into someone who can love without needing to cling? Someone who can be present without trying to control? Showing calmness doesn't mean pretending not to care. It means genuinely caring about yourself enough to not let their small moves destabilize you. Confidence means knowing that your happiness doesn't hinge on their validation anymore. That's what makes you magnetic. That's what shifts the entire dynamic, from you chasing their approval to them realizing they need to rise to meet you. One of the biggest mistakes people make when their avoidant ex starts testing the waters again is over-investing emotionally in the tiny breadcrumbs they offer. That initial text, that seemingly casual comment feels so loaded with possibility that it's easy to read way too much into it. Suddenly, one little message becomes a major event. You start overthinking your replies, strategizing every word, wondering what it means about your future together. Without realizing it, you pour a ton of emotional weight onto something that, from their point of view, might have just been a soft check-in or a casual moment of curiosity. The problem is, when you overinvest like this, your ex can feel it. They sense the emotional pressure building. What started as a small, non-threatening attempt to reconnect suddenly feels heavy. Instead of feeling a calm, open space where they might slowly ease back in, they feel like they're being pulled into a conversation where expectations are sky high. It activates the very fear that made them pull away in the first place. The fear that intimacy will come bundled with emotional responsibility they're not ready for. Avoidant people are hypersensitive to emotional demands, even when they're not spoken outright. When you respond to their small gestures with a flood of feelings, or when you anxiously await their next move, you unknowingly recreate the environment they're afraid of. You might think you're just showing enthusiasm, but to them, it feels like losing their freedom all over again. That's why restraint is so powerful. When you keep your emotional balance, when you respond to them with the same level of casualness they're offering, even if inside you're feeling a storm, you give the connection space to breathe. This doesn't mean you have to act detached or pretend you don't care. It simply means that you stay grounded in your own life, your own sense of happiness, rather than hinging your emotional state on whether or not they text back or engage deeper. You become someone they can approach without feeling cornered or overwhelmed. That calmness, that emotional self-control makes you incredibly attractive. It suggests strength, stability, and emotional maturity, the exact opposite of the chaos they fear. So if you want any chance of rebuilding a real connection, you have to be willing to detach from the outcome. You can care, you can hope, but you can't cling. You have to show through your energy that you are whole with or without them. And ironically, it's when you least need them that they'll feel safest getting close again. Most people approach reconnecting with an ex as if they are the ones being evaluated, the ones who have to prove they are worthy of another chance. Especially when it's an avoidant ex, there's a tendency to slip into the mindset of trying to win them back, trying to say the right things, act the right way, or fix the things that went wrong. But that dynamic is completely backward if you want a real, healthy relationship. The truth is, once you've done the work on yourself, you're not auditioning for them anymore. They're the ones auditioning for you. When someone pulls away because of avoidant tendencies, it often leaves you questioning your own value. You start wondering what you could have done differently, what you need to change to make them stay. But the real shift happens when you realize that anyone coming back into your life has to meet your standards too. You're not just standing there waiting to be chosen, you're choosing too. You have every right to ask yourself, are they capable of the kind of relationship I deserve? Are they willing to meet me at the level of emotional maturity and commitment that I'm ready for? When your avoidant ex starts to test the waters, it's not your job to pass every test they throw at you. It's your job to stay anchored in your self-respect and observe them just as much as they are observing you. Are they approaching you differently this time? Are they showing signs that they're willing to lean into connection instead of running from it at the first sign of discomfort? Are they capable of growth, or are they just looking for a brief emotional comfort without any real change? Shifting your mindset from, I hope they choose me, to, do they deserve a place in my life now, completely changes your energy. You stop reacting to them from a place of fear or scarcity. You interact from a place of calm, self-assuredness, and quiet strength. That shift is magnetic. It's the kind of energy that not only makes you more attractive, but also protects you from slipping back into unhealthy patterns just because you miss someone. You're not trying to convince them of your worth. You already know your worth. And from that place of knowing, you're able to see the situation more clearly. Instead of chasing their approval, you're evaluating whether their actions, not just their words, show that they can be part of the healthy, fulfilling relationship you truly want. That's real power, and that's what ultimately gives you the upper hand without even trying. When it comes down to it, understanding why your avoidant ex tests you before returning isn't about overanalyzing their every move. It's about seeing the bigger picture. Their tests are not a reflection of your worth. They're a reflection of their fears. The more you stay calm, confident, and centered in yourself, the less you get caught in their emotional web, and the more you naturally shift the dynamic in your favor. Remember, you're not here to pass their tests. You're here to live your life on your terms. They're the ones who have to show up differently if they want a seat at your table now. You're not seeking validation anymore. You are the validation. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I hope this gave you the clarity and strength you deserve moving forward. Stay true to yourself, trust your worth, and never forget, real love doesn't require you to chase, perform, or beg. It meets you where you are. Take care, be kind to yourself, and I'll see you next time.